The truth about motorcycle reliability in 2026 isn't on any showroom poster. It isn't in any glossy magazine review. It's buried inside the NHTSA recall database, sitting there in plain English, telling you which bikes will leave you stranded on the side of the road and which ones will still be running when your kids inherit them. And the data this year is brutal. Some of the most worshipped names in this industry, names you've defended at every bike night, every poker run, every Sunday breakfast meet, have campaign histories so thick you could use them as a kickstand. But 5 motorcycles broke the pattern. 5 machines on sale right now have either 0 open defects campaigns or so few that the rate per 1,000 units is the lowest in over a decade. And the bike sitting at number 1, I'm telling you now, you did not expect it. By the end of this video, you might be looking at your current bike and asking yourself a very uncomfortable question. Because the 2026 winner is a motorcycle that hasn't been substantially redesigned in nearly 20 years. And that's exactly why the NHTSA put it on top. So how does the NHTSA actually measure this? Not by interviews, not by paid press launches in Arizona, not by what a YouTube reviewer says after his comped weekend with a manufacturer. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration tracks something colder than opinion. Formal defect campaigns, owner complaint volume, and Office of Defects Investigation case files filed under Federal Regulation 49. When a manufacturer is forced to file a defect report, that's not marketing spin you can argue with at the dealer counter. That's a binding legal document, public on the federal portal, that says something on this bike can hurt the rider. The bikes that show up year after year with no campaigns, or with campaigns affecting a few dozen units instead of tens of thousands, those are the bikes that earn this list. Cycle World can love a motorcycle. RevZilla can hand it 5 stars. None of that filters out the noise the way a clean NHTSA record does. Now, let me set up something for you, because the first bike on this list is going to upset the riders who spent the last 3 years dismissing it as a starter bike. And the federal data is about to make them look foolish. Motorcycle number 5, Honda Rebel 1100 DCT. The Rebel 1100 showed up in 2021, and the old school crowd dismissed it instantly. Too small, too modern, too quiet, wrong sound, wrong stance, wrong everything according to the guys who measure manhood in cubic inches. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Of every cruiser sold in the United States since that launch, the Honda Rebel 1100 has one of the cleanest NHTSA profiles in its entire class. Not by a little. The pattern is consistent across every model year. The 1084cc liquid-cooled Unicam parallel twin, the same engine architecture Honda uses in the Africa Twin, produces a real 87 horsepower and pulls torque from idle in a way that humiliates a lot of bigger bikes at a stoplight. The 2026 Rebel 1100 carries a base MSRP of $9,699. The DCT trim sits at $10,399. The DCT SE at $11,199. And the touring-equipped Rebel 1100T DCT with hard saddlebags and a fairing lands at $11,599. So what happens when a guy pulls up next to your $30,000 bagger on a $10,000 Honda and walks away from you at the next on-ramp? Are you going to tell him his bike is wrong? Or are you going to start asking why the most expensive bike on the road is also the one in the shop every spring? The 6-speed DCT is the part most cruiser riders dismiss without ever throwing a leg over it. Automatic shifts, manual override with paddles, and a clutch durability profile Honda has been refining since 2010. There are riders putting 30,000 miles on these things, commuting in Phoenix summers and Minnesota winters, and the only things they report needing are tires and brake pads. That kind of mechanical silence isn't an accident. It's a manufacturing discipline that earned this Honda its place on a list it wasn't supposed to belong on. But the next bike I'm about to talk about belongs to a brand that did get hit with a major recall just a couple of years ago, And the comeback story is the one nobody at the dealership wants to tell you. Motorcycle number 4, BMW R18 Transcontinental. This is the bike that shouldn't be here. BMW spent the early years of the R18 platform absorbing complaints, and one of them was real. Between 2021 and 2024, the R18B and R18 Transcontinental models equipped with adaptive headlights were hit with a NHTSA campaign covering more than 2,000 units in the United States. The defect involved the headlight reflector attachment points breaking loose, causing weak illumination or glare for oncoming traffic. That's a real number, documented in the federal portal, not a rumor on a forum. And for a brand that builds its identity on Bavarian precision, it was a brutal stretch. So why is the 2026 R18 Transcontinental on a reliability list at all? Because BMW did something most manufacturers refuse to do. They didn't just fix the headlight. They redesigned the entire assembly, brought the whole R18 range up to the EU 5+ emissions standard, refined the 1,802cc big boxer engine across the lineup, and as of the most recent NHTSA database poll, the current production touring trim is running clean. The 2026 MSRP sits at $24,395 before destination, which buys you the 91 horsepower air and oil-cooled Boxer Twin, the optional 180-watt Marshall Gold Series Stage 2 audio system, electronic cruise control, hill start assist, 3 ride modes, and a 6.3-gallon tank that will outrun most cruisers on a long highway pull. Now ask yourself this: would you trust a brand that admitted its mistake, filed the campaign, paid for the repairs, and engineered the next generation around the failure point? Or would you trust the brand that quietly extends the warranty and hopes you don't notice the same problem showing up on the next model year? The R18 Transcontinental is heavy, 944 pounds wet, and its handling rewards riders who respect the mass. But what it offers in return is a torque curve that hits 116 pounds-feet at 3,000 RPM. Available across the whole sweet spot from 2,000 to 4,000 RPM, and a federal record that's been scrubbed clean in the most recent reporting cycle. That's not marketing, that's data. And it sets up something most riders are ready to hear, because the next bike on this list comes from a brand most American riders have written off completely. They're about to find out why that was a mistake. Motorcycle number 3, Yamaha Bolt R-Spec. There's a quiet conversation happening in Yamaha dealerships in 2026, and the dealers themselves don't always know how to handle it. A rider walks in, asks about the Bolt R-Spec, and the salesman almost apologizes for the bike. It hasn't been touched in years. The dash is analog. There's no ride-by-wire. There's no quick shifter. There's no traction control. There's no TFT. In a market obsessed with Bluetooth pairing and connected apps, the Yamaha Bolt R-Spec looks like a fossil sitting next to its more digital showroom neighbors. So why is it here? Because the NHTSA doesn't care about your touchscreen. It cares about whether the bike makes it home. The Yamaha Bolt R-Spec carries an 8,999 MSRP, runs a 942cc air-cooled 60-degree V-twin, sends power through a 5-speed transmission and a belt final drive with a carbon fiber reinforced core, and uses a frame that's been refined since 2014. That last detail is the one nobody wants to talk about. When a chassis hasn't been redesigned in over a decade, the NHTSA profile is basically flat. No surprises, no new defects, no firmware updates that brick the dash. What happens when the bike you bought 8 years ago still has a current production sibling, and that sibling is one of the cleanest mechanical platforms in the entire Yamaha street lineup? Does that change how you think about depreciation? Does it change how you think about resale value? Yamaha has neglected the cruiser segment in obvious ways. The V-Star 250 is the only other cruiser they still sell. The Star venture died after 2022 because emissions rules killed the big inline six. But the Bolt R-Spec survived because Yamaha built it simple enough that there's almost nothing to break. Forged aluminum pistons, a basic ignition system, a wide ratio gearbox that doesn't second-guess your right foot. Compare that to a modern power cruiser stuffed with electronic interventions, and you start to understand why riders who put their own miles on the clock keep choosing the Yamaha. But the next bike on this list is going to make you uncomfortable for a completely different reason. Because it's the one most of you watching have already bought, or already wanted to buy. And the NHTSA data confirms what you've been telling your buddies for years. Motorcycle number 2, Honda Goldwing Tour DCT. You knew this was coming. You knew. From the moment I said the word reliable, you were already mentally placing this bike on the list. And you had to wait through 4 other entries before I'd say its name. The 2026 Honda Goldwing Tour DCT is the logical choice. It is the boring choice. It is the choice that wins so consistently that even the dealers stopped calling it a comeback story and just started calling it the math. MSRP is $30,500 for the Tour DCT, $33,800 for the Tour Airbag DCT, and $26,500 for the standard Goldwing automatic DCT without the trunk. The 1833cc horizontally opposed 6-cylinder engine, the flat 6 Honda has been refining for almost 5 decades, sits low in the chassis in a way that makes an 806-pound machine feel like a sport tourer once it's rolling. The double wishbone front suspension, an oddity in the touring world, was engineered specifically to let Honda push the engine and the rider closer to the front wheel. That's why the Goldwing can carve a switchback that would terrify a comparable bagger owner. But the reason it sits at number 2 on this list, and not number 1, comes down to something subtle. The 2026 Goldwing lineup has a clean NHTSA profile heading into mid-year reporting. The 7-speed dual-clutch transmission, the throttle-by-wire, the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto integration, the Honda selectable torque control. All of it has matured to the point where warranty claim volume is among the lowest in the touring class. So why isn't it number 1? What does the NHTSA see in another bike that it doesn't see here? Drop a comment right now, before I reveal number 1, and tell me which bike you think it is. Because if you've been paying attention to what I've already said in this video, you've got enough information to guess. The bike sitting at number 1 this year hasn't substantially changed in nearly 20 years. Motorcycle number 1, Suzuki Boulevard M109R B.O.S.S. Here's where the comments section is going to explode. Because the bike that NHTSA data, the cold, federal, non-negotiable kind of data, places at number 1 in 2026 is a machine Suzuki designed in 2006 and refused to substantially modify for nearly 2 decades. The 2026 Suzuki Boulevard M109R carries a $15,799 MSRP, runs a 1,783cc liquid-cooled DOHC 54-degree V-twin, produces over 128 horsepower and 118 pounds-feet of torque at 3,200 RPM, and tips the scales at 764 pounds wet. The bore measures 112 millimeters, among the largest forged aluminum pistons fitted to any production gasoline motorcycle engine ever built. The cylinder walls are lined with Suzuki Composite Electrochemical Material, or SCEM, a coating that improves heat transfer, tightens piston-to-cylinder clearance, and reduces weight. Front brakes are radially mounted, borrowed from the GSX-R 1000, hauling the bike down through dual 310mm discs. Final drive is shaft. Rear tire is 240mm wide. So why does this matter to the NHTSA? Because every recall ever issued for a modern motorcycle has the same root cause: a change. A new ride-by-wire system, a new ABS module, a new emissions calibration, a new instrument cluster, a new software push. The Boulevard M109R has been substantially the same machine since 2006. Same engine architecture, same chassis, same brakes, same wide rear tire. And the federal recall history reflects that. When you look at campaign volume across the entire M109R platform compared to its competitors over the past decade, the pattern is undeniable. A bike that doesn't get redesigned doesn't get new defects. So what happens to a cruiser market obsessed with constant updates when one manufacturer just refuses to change a winning formula? What does that tell you about every other bike on the showroom floor? The ones that get new TFT displays, new ride modes, new electronic everything, year after year. The M109R isn't perfect. There's no factory ABS. There's no traction control. The 5-speed transmission is wide ratio and demands a deliberate hand on second gear. The shaft drive will punish a heavy clutch dump. But none of that shows up in the federal database, because none of that is a defect. Suzuki kept it simple, and simple does not break the way complicated does. That is the entire thesis of this video. That is why NHTSA data tells a different story than the magazines, the press launches, and the dealer brochures. And it is also why your next bike purchase is probably going to look very different from your last one. But here's the bigger question this video only scratched. If NHTSA data is the only honest metric, if the Federal Recall Portal is the only place a manufacturer can't lie to you, then what does it say about an entire industry that's built its premium pricing on bikes with active campaigns spanning 4 model years? What does it say about the brand most of you in this audience grew up worshipping? Tell me in the comments what you think the next decade looks like when the cruisers with the longest production runs are also the ones with the cleanest safety records. Because if that pattern holds, and the federal data says it will, then half the marketing in 2026 is selling you something the NHTSA has already flagged. And the question isn't whether your favorite brand survives the next 10 years. The question is whether you keep paying premium money for the privilege of finding out.